How you doing, guys? It's Philip McKernan, and today I want to talk about politics. No, I do not want to talk about politics because I don't believe in politics, and I don't believe that politics can save the world or change the world. I think people can, and people are the only ones that can, and they're not necessarily always the same thing. So I definitely don't want to jump on the bandwagon of all the political conversations that have happened over the last 2 years, and that look like they're going to continue for the next two, if not more. But what I want to do is try and kind of cut through all of this noise in the context of what's going on in the political landscape and kind of go beyond politics and say, okay, what's kind of happening here? And I think what's happening is just the landscape around us is moving. And what happens when that moves is there's two things that happen. Number one is a lot of fear is invoked in people because they think the world is ending. The movement that's happening underneath their feet is they're not in control in. And even if the movement had stopped and they're standing on solid ground, they're still not in control of it anyway. So that's an illusion of control. And I think a lot of people are now spiraling in. Like I'm actually, quite frankly, I'm surprised and slightly shocked at just the energy a lot of people put into politics and the emphasis they put into politics. And when it doesn't go a particular way, how it seems to just consume them from a fear perspective. But why don't we just take a step back from politics for a second and think about what's happened. So what has happened is somewhat unprecedented. So unexpected, whatever you want to call that. In other words, it's now possible for an entrepreneur, a business person to put their pen down in their boardroom and put their hand up and say, I want to run for president of America. And whatever their strategy, whatever their tactics, leave all that aside, that they can actually go after that, create the team, put it in place, create their message, deliver their message, and ultimately get voted into office. So some would say that is a horrendous place that we find ourselves in, that somebody who doesn't have the so-called political experience can get into an office with that has such kind of power and spotlight on it. But that's kind of like a lot of judgment. Okay, there's an awful lot of judgment around that. But also it creates this incredible opportunity for all of us to consider what we could do in a world that has historically limited the things that are done outside of the norm, the big breakthroughs, to the few. And what I mean by that is that never before has the landscape shifted to a point where the underdog or the impossible is now incredibly possible. So, for example, Tiger Woods was dominant in the context of the game of golf, okay, dominant for many years. When he fell off that perch, when he ran out of form, when he got injured or he was knocked off that pedestal, whatever your variation of that, we now have had this incredible influx and wave of newcomers who have won their first PGA title. So now every week in, week out, we're hearing new names come in that I'd never even heard of before in a sport that has historically been dominated by one or two people at the top end, going way back to Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer and all these sort of different guys, and in more recent times by Tiger Woods. We call it the glass ceiling, or we talk about the 4-minute mile when it was broken, that the 4-minute mile was almost, I think it was the 4-minute mile, it was almost seemed like an impossibility. And when it was broken, some people kind of said, well, it'll never be done again. And of course, that was just the beginning of this plethora of people who came through and beat it and went on to do even more extraordinary things in the context of that athletic ability. And I think that's the world we're in today. And that, what was possible before, it's just changing. And what was impossible before is now possible. So rather than pointing the finger and getting frustrated and allowing what's happening and the fear to consume you or the delight to consume you, say, well, how can I do this? What can I do in my space? How can I recreate the conversation, reinvent the conversation, pivot in my current business, shift how I do my business, and create a message that has never been delivered before with the sole purpose of impacting the world, take my deep desire to impact and give back to people and to pivot in a way that it honors who I am, and so on and so forth. And the invitation is just to say, well, what's possible for my life? And look at what might be a negative for you today in the context of this political landscape that's happening in the world, and just say, well, okay, maybe it's negative, but maybe I can personally turn this into some sort of positive and do something that I historically believed was only for other people. Become a speaker, become a writer, create a podcast, create a TV show, give your first talk, whatever that is. And it's just, this might be so simple and ridiculous to some, but I just think that I'm amazed how many people are just allowing what's happened in the last 48 hours in the United States to consume them, and to allow all of this fear be invoked within their bodies, which, by the way, has nothing to do with any politician in the world. It's to do with the fear that has been lying dormant, or that has pre-existed within you and existed within you forever. So the fear today is a political figure. The fear tomorrow will be something else, and the fear last week was something else. So the same fear is just old. It's old fear. But what we love to do with fear and anger, for that matter, is we love to kind of point it in a particular direction at somebody, typically outside of ourselves. But it would be very, very wise for us to consider, well, why am I so concerned? Why am I so scared? Why am I so fearful? Why am I so paranoid about the future? And you might have 25 reasons why, based on your intellectual ability and understanding of something. But really, that's not going to allay the fear, because it's emotion. It's emotion within you. And all the intellectual rationale and all the intellectual questions and all the intellectual answers will never eradicate the fear, because it is emotional, and therefore you carry it with you every single day. So again, the invitation there is to, not seek intellectual understanding for what is an emotional challenge that you carry. So my big ask is it's like if Tiger Woods can, or if somebody can win a major, or somebody else can win a tournament, when Tiger Woods is knocked off his pedestal, and Donald Trump can get into a political system that has historically been closed and only open to the people that are in that political domain or have a lot of experience in that space. If the All Blacks can beat, or if Ireland can beat the All Blacks for the first time in 111 years, I think the Chicago Cubs, I'm not a baseball player or fan, can beat whoever they beat to win the World Series 5 days later in the same stadium, by the way, and win for the first time in 108 years, I think. I can't help but think that Ireland was somewhat influenced and inspired by that. Someone's got to go first to break the spell. Someone's got to go first to break. And I believe, and this is a personal thing, I think that if America didn't vote in its first black president last term, I don't think Trump would have got in this time. In other words, the precedents had been broken. The traditional precedents had been broken. So my question, my invitation is, are you going to wait for whatever it is in the sphere that you work in, that you operate in, that you hang out in, to be broken? Or could you break it yourself? Could you actually reinvent what you're doing, how you do it, who you do it with, and where you do it in a way that has never been done before? But the problem is that when we look through what's possible, we always look through it typically through the lens of what we already know. And the second that we do that, we limit ourselves. We can't see what's possible outside of the way it has been done historically, because we're so connected to it. It's like blinkers. But if we take the blinkers off, suddenly we can see what's over here to my left and over here to my right. And that to me is very, very exciting. So if you're down the dumps today, I don't know if my message will have depressed you even further or lifted your spirits in some way, shape or form. But trust me, I actually believe now more than ever is a time to do shit that we historically didn't believe was possible. And I believe the world is open in a way now. I don't think the world is lost. I don't think there's a divide. I think that we just need to honor our individuality in amongst coexisting in a society, wherever you live in the world, that we can respect each other. But like, be unapologetically you is a very recent, I hate to call it a mantra, but an invitation and a challenge to myself to be unapologetically you. And I don't mean understanding that intellectually. I mean really beginning to lean in and own that. So there you go. So what I don't want is any political responses to this. If you want to outline the 10 or 20 things that why Trump should have got in and why he shouldn't have got in and why you hate him and why he's the devil or whatever it happens to be, or about Hillary or whatever, I'll just delete your post. And if you insist on doing that, my message and who I am is not for you, because my work is not about politics. It's about people. It's about how you can not allow other people to control your destiny. It's about how you can influence yours today, and therefore everybody else is around you. If that excites you, if that type of conversation works for you, if that's the conversation that you feel that you need, well then you know what, this is the right place. And I thank you for listening and watching. Take care, guys. Bye.